I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Nutland, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darien, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta. Mr. Del Greco will not be joining us. Mrs. Downey.
Here.
Mrs. Norian.
Here.
Mr. Nutland.
Here.
Mrs. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Darien.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here, open to the public for agenda items only. Not seeing any, we'll move forward. I just have two items in my report. One is the Code of Ethics. I think everyone was signing it before, so if you haven't signed it, please get it back to Mr. Iapelli. And then I forgot this the last time I was here, but I received a letter from Hackensack Meridian Health Foundation, a donation receipt. Thank you for your donation. Your generosity is a testament to your commitment to advancing healthcare. You make a difference. And the donation date was 11/20/23 to the Joseph M. Sanzari Children's Hospital, and it was for the Tackle Kids Cancer Fund. And we donated $1,604 through student government. So do you want to tell us anything about that, Ms. Bozios, how we raised the money?
I actually
That's
would need
pretty
to
good.
defer to Mrs. Hawley on this one.
Every October, the student government does some type of fundraising for cancer. So in previous years, we've done childhood cancer, we've done breast cancer, and this was part of our fundraiser for that. It was a basic bucket drive where a student government was at each door, and as students came in, they brought change or a donation from home.
You did this all on change?
Well, it is OPS. We don't always just bring change.
So
We also did do a jeans drive where any teacher any staff member that participated over a certain amount of time was allowed to wear jeans, and then they donated $10, I believe it was.
Okay. I'm going to give this to Ms. Bozios, so maybe someone can give it to student government. We should take a copy of it, keep it in the business office for our records, but give them a copy so maybe they can see that they got a nice thank you letter from the whatever.
Perfect. The students will appreciate that.
Yeah, $1,600. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Copy. And we can move on to the superintendent's report.
Did you have a question? No.
That's a lot of change. $10, yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to start today by going over a few things on your agenda. First of all, I want to review the data that we will be submitting as part of our school safety data submission. The school safety data submission is done twice a year. The first submission is done for events that occur between July 1st and December 31st, and then we do a second submission after that. The data that will be submitted for Oradell Public School is that we had one founded HIB during that time. We also have an additional one that is in process. It began prior to December 31st. The investigation is actually, the first reading is on tonight's agenda. It also states that we had 3 instances of restraint over that period of time. 0 of them were seclusions. It also shares about trainings we've done as a school community. It states that we have trained 75 family members in HIV awareness, and that was the training Mrs. Hawley has been doing this year. As you know, to be a volunteer at Oradell Public School moving forward, you will need to attend a training session. It talks about the instructional aid training that was worked, that our behaviorists facilitated on de-escalation techniques such as redirection, planned ignorance, and giving frequent breaks. It talks about the training that 8 staff members received in CPI methods. It also speaks to the programming we've done as a school community, namely the events we did over Week of Respect, the very famous now Turkey Grams program, and some of the efforts that we've taken in special gifts. Also on tonight's agenda, you'll notice that several staff members are participating in the RAPID training. RAPID stands for Reading Acceleration Professional Integrated Development. It is an effort done by the New Jersey Department of Education. Just to clarify, because it looks a little odd on your agenda, 2 of the sessions teachers will attend are during the school day, so they're not being reimbursed for that, but as the OEA contract states, they do get $30 per hour for any professional development that happens outside of school, and one of those sessions is during February break. That rapid training ties into the continued professional development efforts that we have been taking on. In your last board update, I spoke about the work done on the Martin Luther King Jr. Professional Development Day, where workshops included becoming more familiar with Hegarty techniques, digging deeper into Dibble's data. Mrs. Hawley actually facilitated 3 sessions on unpacking math standards. I facilitated a session on an introduction to AI. Mrs. Cataldo facilitated sessions on intro to robotics and STEAM integration. And what I really love about our professional development days, if you talk to teachers elsewhere, sometimes all teachers get stuck in one room doing one training. And we really take pride in making sure each staff member gets what they need. So during that day, there were probably 24 different sessions offered. One of them was facilitated by an external facilitator from IDE Corp, and the rest were administrators and also staff members who have strengths in specific areas. An additional professional development that has occurred recently had to do with the Sunday system, which is structured multisensory reading intervention program used in our intervention program. And we brought representatives from Sunday in, not just to do additional professional development, but to watch us teach, to make sure we were implementing with fidelity. We actually had such a wonderful experience with them. We are working right now to set up them coming in to work with all of our staff on developing an understanding of structured reading. The other piece that I wanted to share about that, which has just escaped my mind completely, was that will very likely be funded in case it comes out in the paper that there's been some changes to ESSER. So what the state did that I'm so happy with is when we originally got our ESSER funding, it was in buckets, and you had to use this amount of money for this, and this amount of money for this, and this amount of money for this. Well, what the state realized is schools might have different needs right now. So they're giving us more flexibility. So you will see on a later Board of Ed agenda that we are in the process of writing an amendment for our use of the ARP funding. And one of those purposes will be to bring in the Sunday system additionally for some more time, and also for an additional math staff developer to come in and work with teachers in specific grades. And I think that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Iapelli.
There's questions. You have questions.
Got questions?
Mrs. Norian?
Well, actually, you had mentioned rapid training and said it was on our agenda.
It's on personnel.
Oh, it's on the personnel agenda.
I believe that's where it's
That's where,
I couldn't get the entire title on the agenda, which is why I wanted to mention it.
okay. I was looking on the regular agenda and couldn't find it.
Mr. Walsh?
You mentioned that you have parents, 75 parents come back. Do the parents whose children were involved in HIB ever asked to come back?
Actually, in our last HIV investigation, the parents asked to come in and get additional resources to work with their children. So we do often offer that. We don't mandate it. We mandate it for anybody who wants to volunteer in the school. You can't volunteer at OPS, you can't come to a class party until you have proven that you've had that HIV training.
So the only way that the parents are involved is by volunteering?
To attend the training?
Yeah,
Yes, that is the mandate, is that they be.
okay. Because the people whose children go through that might have some good points to bring up at that meeting, whatever. You say 75 parents, I mean, that's a lot.
That's actually 75. It doesn't include last year and the trainings we did
Total.
this month and the trainings that are coming. We have one other training session coming up. So I will, during the last SSDS submission report, I'll share the total number of people that have been trained.
Okay, thank you.
And that training then, Ms. Bozios, is counted for last year too, if we were trained last year? How long does it last?
I think we said once out of 7 years, so that we knew that every parent that was at OPS, so if you came to kindergarten this year, you're good during your training. In our additional thought, when we first started doing this 6 years ago, we were trying to get everyone in twice. Once when they were kind of in K, and then once when they were in 4th grade, because your lens changes. But for now, we're just going to focus on getting as many people in during the 6 years as possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Iapelli?
Yes, our audit is complete, and our auditor, Mr. Jeff Bliss of Lurch Vinci Bliss, will be here on February 7th to present the audit to the board. We also, this was just released, the state released additional funds for emergent capital maintenance needs, and we were allocated $18,099. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving to minutes, we have the review of January 3rd. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. We have approval of December 13th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of December 13th.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yeah.
Mrs. Dorian,
Abstain.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, committee reports, administrative items. Mr. Darian, would you take that?
Yes, tonight we have 4 administrative items. One regards to the school safety data submission, the other for HIV report, and then one regarding the use of a paraprofessional staff, and finally, approval of a new position. So I'd like to introduce items A1 through A4.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, Mr. Darian, Buildings and Grounds.
Yes, so we have not, the committee, subcommittee, Buildings and Grounds have not met since our last meeting, so I have no report there. With that, I'd like to introduce items B1 through B, what is it? B1, all facility use?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Regarding All the World Stage, is that the the spring play, or is that in addition?
No, that's the private group they'll be working. They're just using our site for their performance.
Okay,
This is not a play year for Oradell Public.
okay.
Any other questions? Call the question.
Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Norian.
Yes, there's no report from the committee, but I would like to present C1 for approval.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Finance, Technology, Mrs. Acosta.
Hi, I'd like to present D1 to D9.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Mr. Darian, did you have a question on?
I do. I have a question on D7. The grant that we're receiving, this is a ROD grant, a regular operating district grant. How much is that for?
That is correct. We are receiving 40% of a budgeted project replacement of the 8 Airedale units at OPS. The budget is $870,520. The state is reimbursing 40%, so we are receiving $348,208 in aid as a grant.
That is awesome. If we get the money.
So this is the first step. We accept, we sign off, they approve it, and then once they approve it, we can move towards the design phase. I will have land architecture have their resolution for next meeting, hopefully. We'll have it back in time, and we could get started with the design phase.
What was the total?
The total for the project is $870,000, and we're receiving $348,000 from the state. Mrs. Walker?
Now, this doesn't have to do with the Airedale air conditioners that will not be in this summer?
It does.
It does? Okay. So is that the reason? Because we don't have the money yet? or
No,
the
because they're
grant?
back ordered. Everyone has ordered them, so there's no way we can get them. So we're just moving it to the following summer. Is there an expiration date on the funds?
No, we have 2 years to accept.
Oh, we have 2 years to accept?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So no, it's because everyone is applying for them, and we were just notified actually recently from I think from LAN, right? That they said forget it for this summer.
Okay. But this is like all the schools around are applying for this through the state? Is
This
it
was through the
state?
entire state, so every school district, other than the Abbott districts, were applying.
And why not the Abbott district?
That
They already have it?
Yeah, they're in a different bucket all themselves. This is ROD, so regular operating districts, the non-Abbotts. So every district applied. And the county business administrator said that districts that put in for HVAC, heating, air conditioning work, roofing work, those were the top priorities, security. So most districts that applied for those projects received the grant.
And the grant is based on what? So we're getting 300 and some odd, every district? is-
No, our architect had to submit to the state a detailed estimate of what he thinks the project will cost. So he budgeted $870,520. The state reviewed that, felt that was okay, it was correct, they were happy with the estimate. So therefore, they then sent us a final eligibility cost letter, which details this breakout. And then we move forward. If we're happy with it, then we move forward and accept the grant.
I think this is how Riverdale got their $6 million, right? It's a ROD grant. So that's how, you remember Riverdale had their
Right,
thing, and they're
right,
getting,
right,
it's a
right.
40% ROD grant. all the ROD grants are generally always 40% over the years. So you just apply with your project, and they approve, they give you 40%.
And this is not just COVID money, this ROD
This has nothing to
grant.
do with COVID. We've done it in the past.
And that's the max you could receive, 40%. You could get less, but the state is giving us the full grant, the 40%.
Good.
I have a question.
Mr. Notlin?
D6, the Learning Center Huntington has submitted a service agreement to provide instruction to identified 3rd and 4th grade students. How are those students identified?
The grant was specifically written for 3rd and 4th grade students struggling with fractions, because that was an area that we saw of weakness on our last NJSLA results. So part of the grant does require a certain amount of screening. So we've created a screener for 3rd and 4th grade students that they will take based on who we're already concerned about, based on their Linkit data for Form B. They'll be given a screener and then identified from there.
And who set the benchmark to
It
what?
will be the lowest, it will be a certain percentile of student. So we know we can only service X number of
Right.
students.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
And just to clarify, that was specifically through the high-impact tutoring grant.
Those were still COVID. Was that COVID or no? That had nothing to do with COVID. It wasn't strugglers after COVID? I thought it was.
They
people
created
that had-
they created the high-impact tutoring grant, but it has nothing to do with like ESSER funds. It's
No,
a
but wasn't
completely,
it for people that were struggling after?
yes, so that's why
supposed learning loss after COVID?
that's why they specifically, you could have applied to use it for somebody other than 3rd and 4th grade, but you had to really have a strong reason and validate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
On the financial reports, if anyone is interested in a refresher, or if you're new and you would like to go through what the reports, in more detail, other than what you receive, let me know, and I'll be happy to meet with anyone to review them.
You should set a class for a bunch of people to do it if they want at one time.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on finance? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I'm sorry, I still have no report. The committee has not met in over a year now.
Okay. Soon. Personnel, Mrs. Walker.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to present F1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? I actually have a comment and a question. So I know I brought this up last time with the personnel report, and actually Ms. Bozios did get back to me, and it's my fault I didn't get back to her. I had meant, so in our packet, I don't see the minutes for the personnel report from last time. I just see our minutes for, the draft minutes for the meeting, but I don't see the, unless I'm staring at them, I don't see them. So I had mentioned that I really don't like that we put effective dates 9/1 through 6/30 for the year, and you had gotten back to me and said that our attorney said it's okay, and I talked to him again. But I went back to our old agendas, and it really just kind of started fairly recent, yeah. And not always consistent, because it did it, and then it didn't do it, and I believe that we should have the correct date. So the date should either be this meeting or the date they started, because when you go back to look, because this person was not effective 9/1.
Well, we can't do the date they started, because they're going to start well after the board meeting.
That's fine, so I'm
So
saying
we'll
it either
start
has
the
to be.
day after.
But sometimes we retro them, so it either has to be the day they start or our board meeting date when we're, I just don't want to see everyone being the beginning of the year, because they really were not approved to work at the beginning of the year. And then I just want to make sure that the minutes for the personnel were fixed for last time. My other question is, all these leaves, did they go through our attorney's office, all of them?
They did.
Any other questions on personnel? Mrs. Walker?
Have we, and that's a lot of leaves here for, have we been able to supply the substitutes or the people that are going to cover for them?
So the leave that you approved prior,
Yes.
that person has been secured, hired, and actually, even though the leave doesn't start for a little bit, is already in the building because we hired her as a per diem substitute prior to get her used to the community. These two have both, the first one is a very short leave. That
Right.
substitute has been obtained. The other two have been posted. We have begun interviewing. We have not hired those people yet, though, but we also do have a little bit of time.
But we're not going to be left in the lurch with having to have a substitute before we get the fill-in long-term sub?
No, because most of the people that are applying because they're December graduates from school, or they're maybe re-entering the workforce, or in the case of one of them, she currently is a per diem substitute here who is looking to take that next step and get back into the classroom.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey. Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, policy, Mr. Del Greco is not here. I'll ask our former chair, Ms. Downey, any report? We probably need a meeting, right? We need a meeting. Okay, so we need to schedule a meeting. We need to schedule a meeting. So we'll do that after. Public relations, Mrs. Downey. We had a big meeting tonight.
Okay, so we finalized the surveys, and they're coming. That's it.
Yes. Okay, this time, open to the public?
Jen Allen, 954 Wildwood Road. I was happy to receive today's email regarding the Parent Academy about dibbles on February 12th after encouraging many parents to ask for their children's dibbles and helping several parents interpret their scores as well as share some things they can do to support their reader at home. I also had a parent surprised thinking their child was doing just fine as a reader and seeing red flags that are evident in dibbles and need follow-up assessment. I'm here tonight to ask why we haven't ended the use of TC or F&P running records, at least for beginning readers. I want to say you're spreading false news by sending these papers home and telling our children levels and that all the students in the class know the levels. I say it each time, but I think it's important to do so. I don't fault teachers. Teachers follow school leaders. A parent told me today their child keeps saying they're the lowest reader in their class because of their level. I'm not sure that follows helping students have a growth mindset or what we believe in when our theme is grit for the year. Level text does have a value. There's definitely ways to use those ABCD level books, but not for the same reasons that these papers say. Parents should not be using guided reading leveling system when choosing books for their beginning readers, as the letter states. Not until they're proficient readers with solid foundational skills in place. You shared at past meetings you've purchased decodables for KN1. Where are they and how are they being utilized? Today's email about the upcoming Parent Academy said Dibbles is used to determine if students may be struggling with reading and need additional help, and added teachers use it to inform their instruction. Many parents interpreted this as not applicable if their child isn't struggling. Dibbles is a dyslexia screener, yes, and often a teacher needs to follow up with diagnostic assessments, but it has much more value than determining who is struggling. Dibbles is based on decades of scientific evidence, research-based practices, unlike the leveled assessments or running records. Kids can't guess nonsense words, and they can't use context or pictures when reading because there aren't any. Dibbles can be used to group students for small group instruction based on their strengths in the subtest. It can be used to make small groups based on the type of errors students make in the different areas of reading, or generally to make decisions about lesson planning, pacing, double dosing for some, and differentiating instruction and homework. This is why it's important for classroom teachers to administer dibbles to their class, rather than the interventionists that students don't know or have comfort with. In River Edge and at many other surrounding towns, the interventionists cover the teachers for the day to do this assessment, so the teachers see exactly how the students perform, rather than looking at a report that doesn't show student responses similar to the ones we as parents receive. I'm wondering why this isn't the case at OPS. I also want to conclude by welcoming new board members and encouraging all the board members to stay on top of educational research and not just rubber stamping approval on what's recommended. I found many parents that actually do watch these meetings recorded or the live stream. I think there's many positive aspects of being a one-school school district. However, there are many added challenges and very few people with a great deal of power. Our kids deserve the very best. Professional development and education, learning from other districts, being open to feedback and criticism rather than defending practices and test scores that don't test all the facets of reading that are essential to a student's success well beyond elementary years. And staying on top of research is essential in the field. I'm eager to see the curricular revisions and hope that our district is following research and not just updating a skills-based curriculum, but rather embracing change to a knowledge-building curriculum with all the components of the science of reading or structured literacy for our kids, so that the mission statement you read at each meeting, that our district is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction, is actually true. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else, we'll move to old or new business.
Old business?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes. The Odyssey of the Mind is coming up. And I have a judge's class to go to on Saturday. I haven't registered yet, but I will register tomorrow and attend on Saturday. It's it's been virtual for the last couple of years. So I'm all ready.
Is there a charge for the class? Okay,
Sure, the kids are ready too.
okay. Do you register yourself, or do we need to register you?
No, I have to register myself.
Okay. So I guess you can make sure he's registered. Okay, good. This Saturday?
Yep.
Any other old or new business? Mrs. Walker?
Just one quick aside, I wasn't here for the meeting last time I was out, but I just wanted to compliment both Remy and Megan. I heard wonderful things about the last-minute gathering of information to get the broadcasting done online, and there were many, many compliments that you guys had gotten that I spoke to.
You're talking about the Republican
The Republican
soiree?
swearing
Yes, it would
in.
not have happened without Rami
Yes.
and Ms.
Meg.
Bozios. It would
Yes.
not have happened.
And that's, I don't know if that's been made clear, but it should be. And I officially would like to compliment them and say thank you, because it wasn't easy, and I know they spent a lot of extra time doing it. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other old or new business? Mrs.
I would
Moran?
just like to make a comment. This past weekend was the first new board member orientation retreat in person, and even though the snow tried to deter the 100 new board members that were supposed to be there in attendance, 90 of them drove through the snow and actually made it there. And all the leaders showed up, including myself. It actually is such an exciting time for new board members and for the leaders. We all learn while we're in that process, and I certainly hope that our new board members avail themselves of the training. Even though it's mandated, there's a whole lot more that's a positive that comes from that training.
Any other old or new business?
Just one other quick thing. We talk so much about bullying and how we implement all these different programs. And here in Oradell, we only had one incident so far of actually a bullying incident. And I was up in Goshen, New York this week, and there were big signs about not bullying, and they were saying, and on TV that morning, on Tuesday morning, they said that although all the schools are doing so much in trying to prevent it, it has become almost an epidemic in many schools. So I mentioned it to one of the people in the office when I was looking up at this TV with all these beautiful sayings about non-bullying, and she said it's just terrible. And this is a lovely middle school up in Goshen, New York. So I think whatever we're doing, and I'm not to say that we don't have any bullying, that's untrue, but just congratulations so far that we haven't had any serious cases.
Anyone else? Okay, we actually need to go into a closed session tonight for student, legal, and personnel/negotiation issues. So would you like to make a motion?
I will make that motion.
I'll
And
second
I will
it.
second it.
All right, so Catherine made the motion, Mr. Darian seconded. Roll call?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta? Mrs. Downey?
Yes?
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker? Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
I was gonna
Yes,
say
we
no.
will not be taking action after.
Why are you going to say no?